After 8 years in government, this Prime Minister is out of touch and Canadians are out of money. And nowhere is that more evident than in the words of the Prime Minister's own top minister from Newfoundland and Labrador, who said he's, quote, sick and tired of people complaining about the cold weather.
Shameful.
Sick and tired of hearing the stories of seniors in his riding calling to complain that his tax is making it impossible for them to heat their homes. Well, if he's sick and tired of hearing about the pain and suffering that his Liberal government is causing after 8 years, why don't they stop causing that pain and suffering? And if he's still sick and tired, why doesn't he get out of the way and let another government step in and stand up for the people who are trying to heat their homes? Maybe this out-of-touch Liberal minister needs to hear more, not less, of the stories of his own constituents. I'm reading an article from the government's own propaganda arm, the CBC, and I quote, diesel home heating fuels see significant price spike in unscheduled adjustment. Quote, diesel and 2 types of home heating oil saw massive price increases Friday. This would be the Friday that just passed, in an unscheduled adjustment by the Public Utilities Board. Now, what is the solution that the Liberal Minister for Newfoundland and Labrador has to these skyrocketing prices? No, not to produce more affordable energy here in our country, even though his province has access to immense offshore reserves that this Prime Minister has discouraged. No, his solution instead is to triple the carbon tax on his own residents. Well, Mr. Speaker, if he's tired of hearing about the cost of home heating now, just wait until he imposes that tax increase. This tax has been particularly painful for those people who are already living in economically depressed parts of this country that are forced to heat with oil and propane, the cost of which is already higher than in other places. And so we see across Northern Ontario, Canadians will be paying drastically increased home heating bills with the support of the NDP in its coalition with the Liberals. We have, for example, the member for Timmins voting to raise home heating bills on his constituents in Timmins, James Bay. An NDP member who was elected to serve his constituents is now serving and bowing before the Liberal Prime Minister in raising taxes on his own constituents. And now, Mr. Speaker, it's not just in oil-heated communities, it's also in places like Hamilton that the suffering is now spreading. Quote, headline from the Hamilton Spectator, what am I going to do? Go cold? Natural gas bill sticker shock triggers anger for inflation-weary Ontario residents. And the NDP member for Hamilton, what's his solution? He wants to triple the carbon tax on hardworking, blue-collar folks in Hamilton. Thankfully, even though they're temporarily stuck with an NDP coalition member as their MP, Conservatives are fighting for the hardworking people of Hamilton and opposing this carbon tax increase. And so let me quote further from the same article. When a nearly $250 natural gas bill arrived in November, Lily Franceschini called for her parents with questions. Her dad's response, get used to it. The North End Hamilton resident said, or keep your house at 20 degrees. Then, December's bill, $353. End quote. Now imagine what January's bill will look like, as it was even colder than December. The bills keep rising and the temperature keeps dropping. So, Madam Speaker, I announce on the floor of the House of Commons today, the Conservative Party has launched a nationwide campaign to get the NDP Liberal Costly Coalition to wake up. This coalition is taxing our people. We've had enough, and so we're launching a campaign to keep the heat on and take the tax off. We will take take the heat. We will keep the heat on this costly coalition to take the tax off, not just so that heat becomes more affordable, but food. Remember, the carbon tax is actually a tax on the food that we eat. Why? Because when you tax our farmers who produce the food, and you tax the truckers who deliver the food, well, then you tax the food itself. Let me quote the data provided to me by a major mushroom farm just south of here, about a half an hour south of Parliament Hill. The Carleton mushroom farm, unbelievably successful farm. They employ about 100 people. They supply the nation's capital with the mushrooms that we eat. Their natural gas carbon tax bill, $9,000 for the month of July. For the month of July. The bill expected for January, $14,275 for 1 month. Now, Madam Speaker, you think that doesn't get passed on to the consumers? Ultimately, at the end of the day, the farmer has to pay the bill somehow. Now, ultimately, the Carleton mushroom farm will take a hit. They will suffer and probably produce less mushrooms than they otherwise would, which of course means we import more mushrooms from foreign polluting jurisdictions, driving jobs out and pollution up, but also the consumer will have to pay a higher price for those mushrooms. Why don't we take the tax off the Carleton mushroom farm so that they can lower the cost of their produce and increase the amount of food that they produce in this country? We should be more self-reliant. We have the 5th biggest supply of farmland per capita on planet Earth. It is unacceptable that we cannot feed ourselves. We should be a nation that stands on its own feet and kneels before no nation and feeds itself. And that's what The pain and suffering is spreading across the land. We see, for example, the other day I was in the East End, Ottawa grocery store, and a cook walked up to me, and he said he's had to delay his retirement because after 8 years of this Prime Minister, inflation is at a 40-year high, and he cannot afford to retire on schedule. But the thing that really broke him up was that he can no longer buy the ingredients to cook at home that he uses at work. And so he held up a frozen pizza and said, I'm stuck eating this frozen pizza rather than making my own food. Probably a foreign-made pizza that was produced in some faraway land, generating a lot more pollution with processed ingredients that are not as nutritious. And this gentleman who worked all his life feeding other people is not able to feed himself better than that. That's because of the inflationary deficits and taxes that this government has imposed. Inflationary deficits and taxes that the honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn, as my finance critic, has been fighting against, and that is why I'm so proud to be splitting my time with him, Madam Chair. His story epitomizes the Canadian dream. His parents came here with modest means as an immigrant. He grew up in a tough but proud neighborhood. He went on to study finance, got a finance degree, and then went off and opened his own business, built homes to house our people, paid paychecks to other Canadians. You know what I'm so proud of? It's been the tradition that we have big shot Bay Streeters as ministers of finance. Our shadow minister of finance has actually created real jobs, worked with his hands, built businesses, helped troubled youth. He has the practical hands-on experience to know what this country should be, a country where everybody who works hard gets a fair shot at life. And so when we get rid of the carbon tax, when we cancel the inflationary deficits, when we reform our tax and benefit systems so that people bring home more of each dollar they earn, it is not just about mathematics. It is about restoring Canada's promise, a country where hard work pays off, where everybody gets out of the bed in the morning and contributes to their country, can make it better for themselves and their families. That is the country we're going to restore. Let's keep the heat on. Take the tax off. Now let's bring it home.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary